Welcome back. A new book out this week looks at the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II and her relationships with 13 U.S. presidents who held office during her historic reign. Earlier, I spoke with Susan Page, author of The Queen and Her Presidents. Here's some of that conversation. Susan, I love to talk to reporters about books they write, and the first question I always ask is, what nugget or nuggets are you most proud of that readers can find in this book?
You know, there are a couple. Let me tell you one and not say it's necessarily my favorite. But
Okay. President
Trump, when I interviewed him for the book, told me about a phone call that Queen Elizabeth made to him that had never been reported before. It was in the aftermath of the leak of these memos by the British ambassador making devastating assessment of Trump during his first term that resulted in the ambassador being no longer the ambassador. And the Queen called, and he described the conversation this way. She apologized. Well, she didn't exactly apologize, but she thought he was a fool. She didn't say he was a fool, and clearly she had managed to smooth those very troubled waters without actually throwing her ambassador under the bus. And this phone call had never surfaced before.
And that anecdote, that nugget, as having read the book, is a through line through her queenship. Doing that thing you just described, smoothing waters without doing one thing overtly or another. You know,
when I was thinking about this book, it was a quote from President Clinton in his memoirs that made me think maybe there was a book here. And after he met with the Queen for the first time, he said, if she had not been born into royalty, she could have been a diplomat or a politician. Since she was born into royalty, she had to be both without ever seeming to be either. And that is the perfect description of what being the Queen of England for 7 decades involves.
There's a great line, page 34, about her coronation. She would preside over a world that changed in ways she could scarcely have imagined as she prepared for a ceremony suffused with the glory of a vanishing age. She is this person who stands between eras. 7 decades of a completely transformed world.
From the British Empire,
yes,
which ruled the waves, to a world in which the empire crumbled, the Commonwealth emerged, the United States became the dominant power in the world, especially in the free world. And her role, as she saw it, was to protect Great Britain's interests in this world that was being transformed.
How difficult or easy was it to learn about the Queen as an American journalist?
It was hard. You know, she didn't give interviews.
Right.
She didn't write.
Well, there's one that you can check off the list. Not going to happen.
No interviews. She never wrote a memoir. Her diaries have not been released. I hope they will be one day. She did keep a diary in pencil for some reason, but whatever. And what I found was you had to watch what she did, not what she said, because she didn't say much in public. What she did was mostly behind the scenes. When she spoke in public, it was to toast a president or whatever the circumstances she was out, to raise a glass, to say something very positive. But if you watch what she did, that's where you could see her exerting her influence in ways that were not fully acknowledged.
Page 220, President Obama. Her Majesty has such a power to her, but not simply because of her station. She was, of course, polished and poised, but she was also warm and personable, inviting and inquisitive. That's also a through line in all these relationships with different American presidents. And the British, as you write, were nervous about the relationship that was to be. They didn't know how to exactly regard President Obama, his father from Kenya. Was he really going to be anti-colonial? Would he hold that against the British, et cetera, et cetera?
He had he was more interested in the Pacific than the Atlantic. President Obama was. He grew up in Hawaii and Indonesia. What's more, the only connection between their families was that her government had put his grandfather in jail in Kenya. Now, this is not necessarily the foundation for a great relationship. And yet, when these two, very different in generation and in so many other ways, the first time they met, they just hit it off. And it was one of the closest relationships she had with the president, closest, I think, of any except for Ronald Reagan, who was truly a friend. And you know, you covered President Obama. He's not given to false praise. But in Shimon Peres's eulogy in Israel, Obama said he had met three giants, privileged to meet three giants of the 20th century: Perez, Nelson Mandela, and Queen Elizabeth.
You can hear my entire conversation with Susan Page on your favorite podcast platform.